Hi everyone, welcome back to this edition of Pocono Perspectives on the Pocono Television Network. I'm Jim Hamill here in downtown Honesdale, Pennsylvania. It's beautiful here this time of year or any time of year in the Pocono Mountains, and I have the mayor, former mayor of Honesdale, Albert Rutherford, with me, also known as Ab. Thank you, Ab, for joining us here to talk history in Honesdale.
That's my pleasure, Jim.
I want to go back to the fact that you've grown up here in Honesdale. Think about for me just what it was like to grow up in a town like this all those years ago.
Well, that was a long time ago, I'll tell you that. But it was fun, is what it was. Did elementary school here at the Sturbridge School, which is now county-owned, and they have all sorts of activities going on up there, incubator projects, and so forth. Went to high school here. At that time, the high school was right downtown in Honesdale on Church Street between the Presbyterian and Methodist churches. It was convenient enough so that if you lived close enough to the school, you could go home for lunch as long as you got back in time for fifth period classes. It was certainly different from the way it is now. The town itself, I think in terms of the geography and so forth, hasn't changed that much in terms of population and going outside, because we're in this valley. We're limited by the river, the cliff, and so on. So in terms of building and expansion, the borough is about done. There's just no more room. Any expansion would be out into the townships such as Texas Township or Cherry Ridge Township, the surrounding area. But the configuration of the town itself is pretty much set.
And for generations, this community has been an agricultural community as well. There's even farms right within the borough limits, right?
There were. Unfortunately, I think county-wise, we're down to about 40 dairy farms now in Wayne County. When I was growing up here, there were several hundred dairy farms. In fact, the talk then was Wayne County had more cows than people, which is certainly not the case now.
Yeah, your expertise goes way back. You're a student of history. Tell me what it was that really spawned Honesdale as it is today, and it has to do with natural resources, right?
One four-letter word is why we're here today, and that four-letter word is coal, anthracite coal. Coal was discovered in about the 18-teens over in Carbondale by the Wirtz brothers, who were from Philadelphia. They explored up here, made some local contacts, and began to actually mine coal in Carbondale. The question was, how do they get it to a market? They did some engineering. One of the Wirtz brothers himself walked miles and miles in the area to just test out the geography and so forth. The bottom line was they constructed a canal from back then Dyeberry Forks, which is what Honesdale was originally known as, in other words, right here, over to Kingston, New York on the Hudson River. That was 108 miles of canal. But because of the geography of the Music Mountains west of Waymart, the canal was just impossible physically to construct a canal to go over the mountain. So they built at that point a gravity railroad which ran from Carbondale here to Honesdale. And so Honesdale became the nexus of those two communication means. And this coal was stored here, shipped from here, and up until 1898, that's what kept Honesdale on the map.
Because Honesdale is known as the birthplace of the American Railroad.
And that's thanks to the D&H and the piece of iron which is right behind us. The D&H had an amazing civil engineer as its progenitor in the area, a fellow by the name of John B. Jervis, for whom, incidentally, Port Jervis is named. Jervis submitted the plan to the D&H as to how to move some of the coal cars on his railroad, and he called for steam locomotion, which was totally unknown on this side of the Atlantic. There were none. However, in England, in connection with the coal industry there, steam locomotives had been developed to transport coal from the mines to shipping points, also typically canals in England. And this had persisted for at least a decade or 15 years. So there were several steam locomotives in England at that time. And Jervis engaged a young engineer who had worked for the D&H. His name was Horatio Allen, who was convinced in his own mind that steam locomotive transport, rather than canal transport, was the wave of the future. And he had decided to go to England to study the situation for himself. He was a graduate of Columbia University, and he had resigned from the D&H to go to England. Somehow Jervis got to know this, and he made an agreement with Allen to act as agent for the D&H to go to England, and if satisfied with the progress there, he actually authorized the purchase of locomotives by Allen for the benefit of the D&H, and Allen did buy 4 locomotives, had them shipped over here at various times. The one that's sitting behind us is a replica of an engine called the Stourbridge. We call it Sturbridge. My British friends call it Stourbridge. Because of the lion that's painted on the front of the boiler, it's come down to history as the Stourbridge Lion. That locomotive arrived in New York City in the spring of the winter of early 1829. It was reassembled in New York City, shipped up the Hudson to Kingston, and up the canal to Honesdale. And here on August 8, 1829, it was fired up and test run. The engine ran out to Sealyville, about 3 miles west of Honesdale, where it encountered a bridge that was too low to accommodate the tall smokestack. Allen simply reversed his valve and backed into Honesdale. So that little trip of 4 to 6 miles or so was in fact the first trip of any engine designed for commercial use that ran on this side of the water in the Western Hemisphere, and it's been celebrated as such. We're fortunate enough to have in the museum here a replica of the engine, full-size replica, built in the 1920s, and it's the showpiece of our museum here in Honesdale.
And there are still tracks in the area along the Lackawaxen River, but they're not the same tracks. These are excursion lines that people can come and enjoy the beauty of the Lackawaxen River and just the different communities throughout this part of the Poconos.
Those tracks that begin here in Honesdale run down through Hawley and down to the used to be the Erie Main Line in Lackawaxen, our old Erie tracks. They were built from Erie, or from Hawley down to Lackawaxen during the Civil War period, and in the years right after the Civil War, extended from Hawley up here to Honesdale. Now it's interesting because at that point they terminated in East Honesdale near what is now the Agway in that area down there. And the reason for that was simply the configuration of the canal would not permit the railroad to come up into town. They did not get up here until 1898 when the canal was abandoned. The basin right directly behind our museum here was filled in and tracks were laid at that time. And it was only at that point that the Erie was able to make it up here into Honesdale proper.
And I've seen you putting on the uniform and going out on those excursion lines on the Stourbridge line, which has taken visitors here to Wayne County throughout this area to really enjoy all 4 seasons, right?
Yes, that was resumed, I'll put it this way, in terms of the excursions, probably 30, 35 years ago by the the Chamber of Commerce. They purchased a locomotive and 5 coaches. For several years, the Chamber ran the excursions down to Hawley and then farther on down to Lackawaxen. The scenery is beautiful. You see things from the train ride that you just don't see from the automobile. In particular, several parts of the old canal, the stonework and so forth, are still visible from the train, not visible basically from an automobile. And during October, the so-called fall foliage tours, the scenery is just fabulous going down through the woods. Also very interesting, in the wintertime when the leaves are off the trees, it's almost like a different trip. There's more of the stonework is available. It's well worth going down in midwinter, even though it's the cars are all heated. So it's a wonderful feature to have.
And to think all the other notable things here in Honesdale, highlights for children, the magazine, that you see in doctors' offices and at children's, bedsides, is headquartered here and began here. Now even Honesdale has, you said, undergone transformation after transformation. There's eateries, there's coffee shops, breweries. It's really kind of come into its own of late, hasn't it?
Well, it's had to. Once the canal left, just as a matter for its survival, it had to reinvent itself. And as I said before, the different industries that were then, the textile mills are gone now. And as you suggested, it's almost become a little boutique type of thing on Main Street. And some of the neat things, especially with some of the younger entrepreneurs in town, the coffee shops, the breweries, the gift shops and so forth, have once again, the town has reinvented itself to accommodate the situation.
And there's plenty of festivals and things to do throughout the year that visitors can look forward to, right?
Oh, Roots and Rhythm in the summertime has turned into a real destination. And the organizers and promoters of that, and that's only been, what, 10 years at the most, something like
Right,
that.
it's celebrating 15 years now in 2020.
15 years,
Yep.
okay. But they've been getting better and better groups in. It's now a destination. People look forward to Roots and Rhythm, and it's become quite a weekend in midsummer.
That it has. You talk about the future of Honesdale now too. There's a lot of different groups trying to capitalize on all of the, farm-to-table opportunities, the agricultural things that are right in our backyards here. So your hope for the future of Honesdale is that it continues to change itself and get better over time, I would imagine.
I think so, and I'm sure it will.
Mm-hmm. Ab Rutherford, former mayor of Honesdale and history buff extraordinaire, we really do appreciate you joining us here for this edition of Pocono Perspectives. Thank you again, and thank you to everyone for watching here on Pocono Television Network. We'll see you next time.